You're listening to the No Schedule Man podcast with Kevin Bulmer, exploring real stories and lessons learned with a variety of special guests. To learn more about Kevin and to access other episodes of the podcast, please visit noscheduleman.com and connect and contribute at NoScheduleMan on Twitter or Instagram and on Facebook, YouTube, and SoundCloud, all /NoScheduleMan. Thanks for listening and enjoy the No Schedule Man podcast.
I've been known to struggle with reality, not that it is any real mystery.
The question today is, why? Why do I exist? Why am I here? Have you ever stopped to consider that? If you've ever come across Gerry Visca, you will have. And if you haven't yet, you're going to today. Hi, I'm Kevin Bulmer. Today we are exploring the journey of Gerry Visca, known as the Why Guy, and Canada's creative coach. Gerry exists to inspire people and their ideas into action. His current mission is to inspire 1 million whys all around the world, and I'm hoping that this podcast episode is going to make you and I at least a small part of that and helping that. And if you haven't considered your why, I'm hoping that you will by the time you hear what Gerry has to share with us today. As one of Canada's top inspirational speakers and a 16-time author and publisher of Defyeneurs, Gerry Visca is on a mission to inspire a new ROI in the world, one that sees us reach out and inspire other people. Now, I mentioned he's got 16 books out, so I won't try to describe all of them, but I certainly encourage you to visit him online at gerryvisca.com. I'll spell that for you, Gerryvisca, gerryvisca.com, and you can get all of the information on his 16 books, DVDs, Defyeneurs, and everything else that he's involved in. What I will do is talk just a little bit about his two most recent efforts, at least at the time of this recording, and he talks about both in this conversation as well. His latest book is called Influence. It celebrates 11 autobiographies of women inspiring change. And the intention of the book, Influence, is to inspire 11,000 people in the world to become someone of influence. Have an eye for that. Influence by Gerry Visca. And the other one that I can really tell is near and dear to his heart, and you're going to hear him, if you keep listening, describe the process of coming up with a book called Remembering Why. It's Gerry's first novel. In all of his 16 books, this is the first novel, and the intention of the book is to take the reader on a wondrous journey of remembering why they exist. The characters, according to Gerry, are full of life, and each one is on their own journey of discovering what matters most. Gerry suggests that we all knew why as a child, but somewhere along the way, we forgot who we truly are. I know that certainly happened with me up until very recently, and spending time with people like Gerry Visca only helps to get back in touch with those things that really matter most, the why. Now, just one last word about Remembering Why. Only 500 first edition copies are going to be released in July of 2017. So if you're hearing this podcast episode right around the time it comes out, in the middle of June 2017, you want a first edition copy of that book, make sure that you jump on that pretty quickly. And I know that it's going to be a fabulous, fabulous piece of work, and you'll really be happy to add that to your collection and to learn from what Gerry has to share. A note about how I came across Gerry. It's amazing to me how when you really start to understand your passion and purpose and act from the heart, you're just naturally drawn to places that you might not otherwise go. It was a Friday night a couple of months ago from the time that I'm recording this that another friend of mine, I would say a recent friend of mine, Michael Doyle, was having an event to launch his book At the Helm. And you can hear Michael's story in episode 44 of this podcast if you go back in the archives. And when I got to that event, it was a Friday night. And I know myself well enough to know that a couple of years ago, I probably wouldn't have done that. I would have thought, I'm tired from working all week and it's Friday and I just want to go home and crash. But I remember being charged up to go and to spend time with Michael and to see who else I was going to meet and just celebrate the release, the culmination, the completion of Michael's creative ideas and all of his effort with his book release. And when I got to that event with my kids, my sweetheart Caroline was already there, and I didn't even know she was going to be there, which was really cool. And she was there talking to Gerry, along with his life partner, Angela Kontkin, who also has become a friend, and you can hear her in episode 49 of the podcast. That's how I was first introduced to Gerry, and it was just immediately apparent that there was a really powerful positive, creative, collaborative, nurturing, and inspiring energy around both Gerry and Angela and some other people in that room that night. And it's something that Caroline and I talked about at great length afterwards. And I remember going away from that just really happy to have helped supported Michael, but also to just take a little piece of that positive energy away, and then to be able to be inspired to circle back around and reconnect with Angela and with Gerry, which has, in turn, led to this podcast episode and the one, as I mentioned back, episode 49, which I encourage you to listen to with Angela Konkin. But on to the story and the journey of Gerry Visca, and it's a good one. This was a really fun conversation. Some of the key points of many that I took from my time with Gerry Visca include, number one, life is not linear. And your why, finding your why, is not a linear process. You're going to, it almost goes against everything that certainly I feel like I was taught when I was a kid. When they're asking you things like, what are you going to do and what are you going to be when you grow up? Like you just go out and then you check off all these boxes and then everything's okay. Well, it didn't work like that for me. If it works like that for you, send me an email and let me know. My experience has been more consistent with what I think Gerry has shared, that he had experiences when he was a very young child that related to things very much later in life, and it all kind of bounces around. And once you really start getting in touch with who you are and thinking about and examining and nurturing your why, you'll see that it's not a linear process, that these pieces of different parts of your journey all come together to a greater whole. Number two, the idea of quantum creation. I can only imagine how often Gerry gets asked something like, how do you do all of this? Where do you find the time for X, Y, Z, 16 books and speaking around the world and all of this kind of stuff? I know I get asked that a lot. I don't have any books published. I can only imagine what it's like for Gerry, but he gives us some insight into how all of this is possible in the discussion coming up. The key is in quantum creation. Scheduling quantum days. I'll let him describe that because we get into that in this discussion. So if you're at a point where you're thinking, you know what, I feel like I'm in touch with some of my why. I know what I would like to do, but I feel like I don't have the time for it, or I've got all these limitations. That's in your mind. Listen for what Gerry says about quantum creation. I think that'll probably help. And number three, passion plus purpose equals outcome. That's from Gerry's playbook, not mine. But in terms of understanding your why and following your heart, passion plus purpose equals outcome. Even if you're not completely sure of the why yet, follow your heart. You know, that gut instinct. And the why and all of the hows will eventually take care of themselves. Gerry tells some great stories that is great evidence, or are great evidence of this idea. One of them was when he was in his days as an architect and he was involved in a hospital project, and how he was able to navigate through that, and then ultimately how he moved on from that particular company and on to what he was going to do next. He was in touch with his passion, felt like he knew what his purpose was, and he is going to describe for you what the outcome was. This was just a fabulous time, a fun discussion. I know you're going to love it. Here is the conversation exploring the journey of Gerry Visca, the Why Guy, on the No Schedule Man podcast. Gerry, what's your first recollection of considering or asking yourself why?
The deeper why was, I'd say when I was just about to leave the field of architecture, the question why was starting to surface back in around 1998, 1999. That's when I was asking, why I was starting to focus more on people than buildings. So I had this desire to build up people rather than building up buildings. So it was definitely back at that time.
How did your interest in architecture come to be?
I was always fascinated with that area. It was history, just the overall sociology, just the study of cultures, the study of sociology, the study of cities. It was just something as a kid growing up as in Italian culture, and was fascinated with Italy and Rome and ancient times, ancient histories, and Egypt. But getting into architecture, a lot of people think architecture is all about buildings. It's actually maybe 70-80% more about people and sociology and culture. So it was always that aspect of human behavior and human psychology that was that side of architecture that really interested me.
What was the earliest that you remember being aware that that was holding your interest to the extent that it was as a kid?
Oh, since I was 6. I mean, I often write about this, and in the books I've published, and especially in the newest book, Remembering Why, this novel, this fable. Since I was age of 6, I still remember like it was yesterday, sitting on my grandmother's couch, just knowing that I was meant to help humanity in some way. It was always there. It was a feeling, and I believe the more you and I would spend time, the more that you would know that. I believe that we're all born with that purpose. It's just a matter of remembering and listening to those whispers. But it usually happens around that age. It's around that age of 6 where, if we're able to kind of tap into that, we can really propel ourselves forward and really connect with that future self.
Where do you think that sense came from, Gerry?
I'd say it came from maybe a higher source from, we're all here for a purpose. We're not here to build shopping malls, Kevin. We're not here to pay bills. We're here to advance the human race forward. So it's intuitive. We all have it. We all have these gifts. And, some of us believe we've had to live multiple lifetimes before we finally understand that universal role that we have. So it's there. It's there. It's in the ether. Some of the greats of the past would say that, it's there. It's in the air, and it's just we need to learn how to understand that we're here for a bigger reason. We're here to connect and advance and thrive, and that's going to happen by going beyond aptitude tests and vocations and titles and ranks. That's not going to do anything for society.
I agree with you. I'm curious, though, about how you viewed that more when you were 6, because I'm betting you didn't have that kind of emotional vocabulary then. There must have been just some sort of that's cool. I want to know more about that. Like a 6-year-old mind. What was it that you remember those lights going on?
I just remember, I write about this a lot. I remember sitting on my grandmother's couch, and it felt like, I can't describe it. It felt like a magic carpet, and it just wanted to lift me off. And it was just a feeling of a lot of people and a lot of people around me. And I didn't really understand what those details were. I just kept seeing myself in a sea of people and helping people and building up. I didn't know what it was. It just was this feeling. It was cool. It was very, very cool. And it stayed with me for a long time. And I used to talk a lot in school. I used to get it's funny. My mother recently shared with me my old report cards, Kevin, and it says he talked too much. He always wanted to help everyone else. He can never stay to himself. And, and it's funny because I make, as my whole existence is to help people understand and answer the only question that matters. Why are we here? So it requires a lot of talking to people. So the funny thing, I was ostracized for that and criticized and put in the corner and put on the bad bench in front of all the school to watch for just talking to people, right? Daydreaming, talking to people.
A little bit of foreshadowing there, huh? Didn't fall in line, so we better put this guy. He's trying to help people, so let's throw him in the corner.
Yeah, the emergence of the Defyeneurs spirit, it was starting back then. So,
is there anything, Gerry, to the fact that it was your grandmother's couch? That you had that kind of, it sounds like almost a divine experience there, if I can use that term. I'm wondering if you feel that there's a connection there related to your grandma at all.
I've always felt that. I feel her now. I spent a lot of time with my mother, my grandmother, because my mother she was a single mom raising 3 boys, and she worked tirelessly to just to put food on the table. So I spent a lot of one-on-one time with my grandparents. But there was always a spiritual connection with my grandmother, always. There was always a deep, profound connection. It was almost like she was, her whole role was to unleash mine. It was to guide me. It was like a Sherpa. And, we have teachers, and, Angela and I believe that when you're ready, when students are ready, teachers appear in many forms. Some people call them angels. Some people call them guides. Whatever it is, it's just about tuning into that. And my grandmother was certainly that for me. And she still is. I feel her all the time. She's on my nightstand. I see her at the corner of my eye. Like, she's just always around.
Yeah, I've got a grandfather on my mother's side that is my my image of my Yoda, my Buddha, my guiding spirit. So I feel like I know exactly what you mean. I'm interested in going back to what you just described a couple of minutes ago, Gerry, about when you were going through school and you like to talk a lot and were being kind of ostracized for that. How did that make you feel?
I mean, I not good. I mean, at the same time, I felt like I was doing what I needed to do, which was to help people, make them laugh, connect with them, make them feel better. You know, I think it was harder on my mom, you know, because she was constantly getting these calls that, you know, we got a problem with your kid. You know, he won't color inside the lines. He won't stay in the line. He's always, you know, he's making trouble, and she didn't understand it. So I think it was difficult for her, and it was difficult because I was always in trouble with her too. So
how did that evolve then as elementary bled into high school and beyond? What was it like?
I'd say that carried through high school, middle years, high school, definitely, in terms of, you know, always wanting to be there, be a support for others. And I didn't really understand it at the time. What, you know, I mean, now I coach, but I wasn't necessarily intending to coach people. It was just this wanting them to feel better. So, you know, I was an intelligent kid, but I didn't apply myself because I was too busy taking care of everybody else, right? And that energy carried on. But at the same time, the creativity and, you know, the curiosity. You know, I wrote a book a couple years ago called "Drive Your Curiosity," and, you know, that curiosity is what was really there consistently since the age of 6 right into high school. It was that deeper curiosity that there's something bigger going on, that there's something that, you know, I'll give you an example. I get called in to speak. I've spoken to a lot of schools, MBA programs, right down to like grade 7, 8, 6. And it's funny because the high schools bring me in, but then after they hear me talk, they're like, why did we bring this guy in? Because I'm not a big fan of the high school system. And it's funny because I remember getting put through these tests, Kevin, you know, in grade 7, 8, 9, whatever, that showed I should be a furniture designer or a farmer. And I tell you right now, like, I can't stand bugs. I hate being outdoors with farm animals, and I can't make furniture to save my life. So, you know, we try to box kids into this, you know, it's an old industrial model that just doesn't work. It's like a square peg in a round hole. And, you know, these defiant ones, right? That obviously, you know what that's like because you're among them. You know, that shows up in many interesting ways. You're vilified and glorified at the same time. So
I find it interesting to see that you maintained that curiosity and that level of creativity up through high school, even though I'll use the word marginalization, or certainly the frustrations, it sounded like those continued, but that didn't beat the spirit out of you for wanting to help and explore?
No, it didn't beat the shit out of me. No, it didn't. And I think that's who I am today. I wasn't trying to be defiant. I was just carving out my way, you know, and, you know, I often coach on that around creating your own outcomes. And I was also, at the same time pursuing a tennis scholarship around that time, in the high school years, because I was a ranked tennis player. So I was always kind of out there with people that were just, you know, we were sleeping in our car, you know, going from tournament to tournament. And it was our time to do it our way and to live it our way and to live life our way. So we weren't trying to, you know, I wasn't trying to intentionally get in trouble. I was just living at the time, my deeper purpose.
What was your overall sort of sense of self-esteem at that time?
You know, I'd say my self-esteem, I had a really good network of close friends because I grew up in a smaller town in Niagara Falls. So, you know, I was very popular. And then the tennis, I was, you know, kind of like top 1 or 2 in Southwestern Ontario. So from being recognized by your peers, it was very good. I think what got challenging for me, self-esteem was never really challenged. It was when my mother she was getting remarried at the time in my later high school years, that I think my stepdad, who recently passed away, who was a hero later on in my life, just a champion. But at the time, I think he wasn't able to really deal with this kind of, you know, frenetic excitement and curiosity, energy. He had a military background, and worked in the government. So I think it was difficult to see this 16-year-old kid, showing up the way I did. So that kind of beat me down a little bit, seeing the arguments and the confrontation there.
How did you deal with that?
It was difficult. There was times where I almost took off. I almost ran away to join some of my friends in Florida who were pursuing their tennis scholarships. They were a couple years ahead of me. So yeah, I was ready to go. It was funny because there was this one guy who was a really good friend of mine. He was supposed to pick me up. I was supposed to be gone, and I don't think I would be around if I did go. And it's funny, he didn't show up, and he went. And then years later, he told me that, I could have taken you, but there was something, that you needed to stay here. And again, there's that kind of guiding, that guiding light, right? So, because who knows what would happen in Florida, hanging out with these tennis dudes and sleeping on the dorm floor, it could have been crazy.
What happened next then? As high school evolved and into the next thing, what went on?
I first went to college. I went for architectural technology before I went on to do my degree in architecture. So at that time, it was really a struggle with my parents. So it was, they basically gave me an ultimatum: you either go into the Army, Air Force, or you go to school. And at that point, I wasn't ready to go to university. I was too full of energy and pent up, not rage, but just frustration with things that were happening in my family life there, that I went to college. So I went to Toronto, and I lived in Toronto for a couple of years and went to George Brown College. And it was great because there was a maturity that started to happen. And I was surrounded by a lot of mature students who had come from university, and it was good. It was a real growing stage. And then I started working as an intern in an architectural firm, and that started really helping me grow. And at that point, I decided to pursue my degree, and that was while I was still working full time. And then I got engaged. I got engaged very young. I got engaged around 21, 22 years old, 23, like in my early 20s. So life started going very quickly at that point.
What length of time was it, Gerry, between the one that you just described and when you arrived at feeling like there was going to be a shift, that you were interested more in people than the architecture?
I'd say in the first few years within the architecture, I was working on a project. It was a closing of a library in Toronto. I won't mention which one, but it was a closing of a library, and it was a very historic library. So there was a lot of public rage, and I remember being the lead designer on this project. So I got thrown into the wolves. At the time, I didn't know. Hey, Gerry, I want you to go kind of field these focus groups. I was like, yeah, sure, that'd be great. And I realized how much anger there was in this group. By the end of the 2 or 3 sessions with these community groups, I won them over. And it was at that point that I realized that, I helped them see that they weren't really losing a library. They were gaining some other, it was being kind of redesigned and a cafe brought in, and it was a really good thing for them, but they didn't understand at the time. So it was really early in that architecture that I realized I loved dealing with people. And then I got moved into these large scale hospital projects, and I was always kind of working with people, patients and people, and I really enjoyed the people side. And again, my studies in architecture, I always gravitated to that human behavior, that human condition.
I wonder if you can take me further into that, Gerry. Forgive me. I admit I'm ignorant. If you tell me architecture, I'm thinking about somebody at a drafting table or working with a computer program or designing or something like that.
Yeah.
But what you just described, I'm envisioning, speaker Y guy Gerry, with a whole group of angry people all around him, getting really introspective and tell me why you feel the way that you do. But so I'm not quite sure how to picture it in my head, but how did that process play out? If you can take me through sort of the nuts and bolts of, your words, winning them over.
Well, I always say there's 3 kinds of architects. I'll just start off with that, just to headline that. So, there's the technical architect, There's the design kind of architect, and then there's a real sort of social architect. And, architects are also known for designing, cities, urban design and urban centers. So architects really get to have a real good sense of culture and people. So when I was presenting to these groups, there's a way to present that it's all about making them feel a part of it. And some people do it better than others. I just happen to remember, I spent years being put on the bad bench for talking too much, right? So I just naturally was a good speaker, and I just knew how to get into their hearts. I knew how to make them feel a part of this community, of this project. So I realized at that point, as I was doing more and more presentations to community groups, to even within my school program itself, to the many architects that would come in to listen. I was constantly told that, man, you're really good with people. Like when you speak, people listen, so it just evolved. So it was just this winning over. It wasn't like there was a loser or a winner. It was just this ability to engage their hearts, to connect with their hearts. That's what was happening then.
Well, it sounded like you were able to kind of get people on side together, not choosing a winner or a loser, but turn what sounded like kind of a negative energy into something that was a lot more positive in general for everyone involved.
That's right. Like, together we're better. Let's do this together kind of thing. It wasn't hey, you're going to get this. It was this rallying up of the troops, right? And, it was inspired leadership. And I think they felt that they were being, there was this leadership, but at the same time, they were a part of it. So that was good.
So as that was happening, what was going on inside of yourself that told you that you were noticing that you were starting to kind of evolve and potentially move toward a shift?
It's a good question. It's just, there'll be a consistent common denominator in my answers here, because there was just this inner feeling, this inner curiosity, this inner knowing that there's something more. And even though I would excel at my studies, I would excel at architecture, I would excel at anything that I was doing. And, even later on when I started my own company, there was just this curiosity, Kevin. It was just remaining open that there's something going on here. There's something bigger. It's not just, A to B or A to Z in a linear straight line, do your work, get paid, go home. There was just an openness, this openness to, and I coach on it now a lot, but there's just this openness to an energy that was bigger than all of us.
You described the time a few years prior to that when you first entered college, and then the internship, and then eventually going on to get the degree, that at least at the outset of that, it sounded to me, Gerry, like there was a lot of frustration and angst, and for the reasons that you described. How were you feeling then around the time that you just described about that, just that sense of moving, from the buildings more toward the people side of it? How did just sort of the way that you felt about things compare, to say to that guy that entered college?
I often say I wrote a book called I Don't Know What the Hell I'm Doing. And I didn't know what the hell I was doing, but I always knew at the time I didn't understand what it meant to know why. I mean, now, of course, as the why guy I do, but I just, it was a flow. It was a sense of flow, and there wasn't anxiety with it. It was just this natural flow. It felt right evolving out of architecture. It just felt right. It felt right, creating, and I can go into that later, like creating that, the hybrid marketing company that evolved into branding and then publishing and of course all the inspirational work I do now worldwide. There was just this surrender. It was just a surrender to it, and knowing that, there was something on the other side.
What were some of the first steps that you took then as part of that surrender?
I'd say that, I want to call it at the time meditation, which Angela would like, but I didn't understand what that meant at the time. It was just this, stillness, this ability. I was taking a lot of martial arts at the time. And I think it was the martial arts. It's funny. When I see little kids studying martial arts, for me, there was an understanding, and I worked with really older, kind of spiritual masters that just started to teach me to kind of still your energy. So at the time, I really didn't know what that was about, but it was calming me. It was allowing me to center myself and just, it was like being in the eye of a storm. And so I would attribute that definitely to some of that Asian, Eastern influence, that kind of thing.
Where did you pick up the martial arts initially?
It was my brother. I have two older brothers. The middle brother, I kind of, really idolized him, kind of followed his footsteps, both in tennis. And then, of course, I surpassed him in that. But he was getting into martial arts, and he started to bring me out. And he said, no, I think you'd like this. And so it was just this interest in what he was doing. And then I really started to gain a real passion for that.
So you're in the eye of the storm and you're feeling calm, but what were some of the actions then that you decided to take to start to manifest the next part of your path?
I'd say, just this belief. There was the strengthening of the belief, just listening to the voices, listening to the whispers. I call them inspired thoughts. Thoughts started showing up that turned into some actions. When I finally decided it was time to leave the field of architecture, I remember I had just spent the last 2 years. It was about 21 years old. I was in London, Ontario, managing one of the largest hospital projects at the time in Canada. It was a huge undertaking. And I was responsible for kind of getting this project going, hiring 100 staff, and then letting go of like 50 staff. And there was just a lot of chaos at the time. And I just felt it's time to go. I got to follow my heart. And I didn't know what that was. I literally didn't know what the hell I was doing. I just needed to follow my heart. And at the time, I didn't know if I was going to be continue on with architecture or kind of morphing it into some of my other passions that I was starting to pursue at the time, that like presentation, marketing. So it was just a following of my heart, taking action, listening, conditioning my body, staying fit, keeping my mind fit, and just turning off the noise, turning off the negativity. That was a big one. Not listening to the ankle biters.
So from the time where you had that intuition, okay, it's time to go, to, well, let me maybe figure out a different way to phrase that. What was the act of going? Sorry,
say it again.
Well,
what was the act?
So you decided at one point, okay, it's time to go. So
it was explosive.
Tell me about it.
It was explosive because, I was married. We were just a couple years into our marriage. We had a little one. We were in a new city in London, Ontario. But at the time, it was great because my wife was actually, my ex-wife at the time was actually very supportive of this leaving, this following my heart. And the bosses didn't like it so much because I was really central to the whole operation there. And that didn't go well at all. I literally just said, look, I've had enough. And, they were trying to get a bit legal on me, but I just said, look, it's time for me to go. This isn't where my heart is. So I literally just took off. And within a week, like I was set up, I had met a really great architect. I ended up sharing space with him. I had a receptionist within the first 5 days, and I had already landed. People heard I was leaving, and I was getting calls like crazy because they wanted me involved in their project because I had a reputation for, getting things done and, really being able to lead projects. So it was cool. I just took off and it just started building. That first 2 years was a real ride.
At what point in your path did you become the why guy?
That's a really great question. So there was sort of 3 stages to that. So 1999 is when I left architecture and I started Red Chair Branding. So for the first few years, I was literally helping the top construction performers, like multi-million-dollar firms, win big competitive bids. Like we're talking over $1 billion in wins. That's what I was helping them do. I just knew how to get to the why behind a project and then really present it well and help them. So that first few years, I was known as that presentation guru, like the why guy I wasn't calling myself the why guy though. I knew how to extract the why for stuff. in projects. The next few years was just really intense, hardcore branding and marketing, and my reputation was really getting out there. The firm was growing. We had about 11, 12 staff, but everything shifted in 2007. I mean, everything. Everything shifted. 2007 was when I first published my first of 16 books called What Have You Got to Win? And it was at that point, I didn't know what the hell I was doing when I left architecture to start a hybrid marketing branding company. I didn't know what the hell I was doing when I started to write my first book. And here's an example. Like, I was turned down by 55 publishers. So I said, whatever, I'll just publish it myself. And, that became a catalyst for everything. So 2007, Kevin, was really when I said, I got to start focusing on the bigger picture of what I'm really about. So the why guy started to really evolve. The starting point was 2007.
Let's go back even before that a little bit, Gerry, if you'll indulge me. What was the impetus for what became that book? What Have You Got to Win?
It was, What Have You Got to Win was the result of all these wins that I was helping these massive companies, this $2 billion, $1 billion to $2 billion in wins. I wanted to document those insights. I wanted to document, those revelations, what it took to help those companies win, because nobody was doing it. Like, nobody was doing that kind of high level presentation, strategic, behind the scenes, strategy. So I wanted to give back. It was really a giving back. It was a book that was written for anybody that wanted to learn how to win in competitive situations. It wasn't intended to generate book sales. I just had to write it. And I tell you, it was a great feeling, because around that same time, I was starting to listen. I was listening to a lot of inspirational CDs. I'm a big fan of personal development, as you know, and audio. I was listening to a lot of audio. And Jack Canfield at the time, who's now a good friend of mine, and I'm publishing one of his new books, and he's publishing two of mine. But at the time, I was listening to his success principles, and it was at the same time, 2007. And there was one of his insights was take 100% responsibility of your life. And it was like he was speaking right to me. He's like, and it's funny because within 6-9 months, I was sharing stage with Jack, and we started to develop a friendship. And so he was a real impetus for that.
Well, let's get back into the timeline of where you left off, where you kind of took us back to, where that first book comes out. And I think we skipped forward in the story because now you're on stage, and I haven't asked you yet about how all that developed. And I'm not going to hold you too long to each individual thing. Otherwise, we're going to be here for a few hours. So I won't drill so granular as I might with somebody else, because I'm interested even, Gerry, in just, for somebody that has never done something like writing a book, the decision to, or how's that going to fit into my life? How does it all go? But the whole theme of, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. You seem like you've got a pretty ingrained operating system of just throwing yourself out of the airplane and figuring out how to open the chute on the way down. So I'm guessing you don't get in your own way a whole lot thinking about how maybe you could do something. Is it more fair to say that you just get into doing it?
Definitely. As you I'll give you an example. Like I literally just finished writing my first novel. I've never written a novel, and I've always wanted to write a novel, but I've done enough of just jumping in and successfully jumping in. Like, I don't just jump in, taste it. Oh, okay, that didn't work, and then take off. Like, I'll finish it. And I don't get hung up in the house. It's not the way universal energy works. And once you kind of really understand the way that works, you'll get the hell out of the way. So, and the reason that you see me even this interview jumping with you is because getting to our why, Kevin, is not linear. It's not linear. It's not, I can give you a chronology of events like we're kind of tapping into, but, and I'm doing that too, because you're asking me these questions, but getting to that why is not linear. There was times where I would remember my 6-year-old self talking to me. I remember when I was 6 talking to my future self. Like, there's something bigger going on with all of us. But just because we haven't been taught that in school, we think we got to follow what everybody says and society says. So I can't give you a perfect linear chronology of events because it just doesn't work that way. And my life has never unfolded that way.
What level of I'll call it planning. Like when you do get the seed of an idea, whether it's to change a career trajectory or write a book or start speaking, because you're so quick to action, what is your sort of planning process or level of, I think you know what I'm getting at, and I'm searching for the right vocabulary, because some of them, including yours truly, have victimized themselves by paralysis through analysis. I'm guessing, though, that you do enough diligence to satisfy yourself. Does this fit with my why? Yeah. Okay, let's go. What's that like?
Okay, that's a great question, and I'll answer that in two parts. When you know why, I'm talking the deeper why, and I can share more of that later, what that means. The way is revealed, and the way is revealed only when you know why. And I'm talking deeper why. So that is the analysis. You just intuitively know this doesn't fit, this doesn't fit. I'll say no to 1,000 things and yes to maybe only a few. So you start to get, I mean, now I don't live by, I kind of know what the hell I'm doing on a lot of fronts now, but I have a really great scheduling system that I've developed called Get Clear. And I'm actually presenting that this Saturday to a whole bunch of people in London at this publishing workshop that I'm delivering as a gift to 50 people, as a way of giving back. And it's about structuring your days. They're called quantum days. So if you take Monday to Friday, there's days where I'll just dream. Like I call Mondays drive and dream days. And you have to have certain days in your schedule, Kevin, where you're just dreaming big. No analysis, just dreaming big. Because if you don't schedule these days, guess what? It's not going to happen. And then there's writing days. So Friday's a real big writing day for me where I'm gone. Like I'm gone and I'm just writing. And I'll be just no access to me. Then there's the other days are kind of mixed in with, different kinds of publishing days. I'm up at 5 and I'm writing till 9. I'll do more in 4 hours by 9 a.m. than most people will do in 3 weeks. So it's about taking your time and redefining it. And once you start to see that time is really, it really is an illusion. Einstein I like to think was right. It is a stubborn illusion. It's not so linear like you think. You'll be able to do what I call quantum creation when you're that focused on what it is that you're here to do. So when I sit down and write a novel, one would say, "Oh, it's probably going to take you 10 years because you haven't written a novel." It's not about time. It's just about believing and surrendering and then listening and taking the right action. I call it inspired action. It's not about just doing things. It's about doing the right things, right?
Tell me then, Gerry, I'm curious about this listening to you talk, about a time when you got an idea, something that you thought, okay, this is going to be a good action to take, something to put into play, that you measured against your why and then decided to drop because it didn't fit.
Yeah, there's many projects. I'm just about to release a book called Influence, 11 Women Inspiring Change. It's an autobiography on 11 women. I conceived this project almost 4 years ago, Kevin, and I put it on hold because it wasn't right. It was so there's times where you'll not so much drop it, but you'll pause it. And that project's a great example where it was going to be written with just 2 other women. It was 3 of us. And there was a lot of resistance with this one individual, and just something wasn't right. But a sense of me knew that this was going to come to fruition later on. And hence, 4 years later, it's probably the most explosive autobiography I've ever written. 11 most extraordinary women that I've ever met. So it's kind of just, there's like an ebb and flow to it. There's certain things that, I'll start with, but then it's time to either pause it or, completely. It's very rare that I'll just stop something. I haven't really had too much of that. The only thing I've had is leaving architecture, ending a marriage, like moving forward, a major reinvention. Those have been more, I would say, pivotal, sort of monumental leaps, right?
Where was it? It's a multi-tiered question that I just thought of in my mind, Gerry, and I want only just one tier. But I guess what I was getting at is that, we launched into the, deeper why, quantum days and quantum creation and stuff like that. I'm wondering how and maybe when sort of that all kind of clicked in for you. But that's the multi-level. I'm not to suggest that it all clicked in, but at least in terms of the why seems to be the galvanizing part here to all of it. How did that start kind of to come into your sense of being to where it kind of clicked, where you thought, okay, this is the sort of the centralizing factor here to everything in my life?
I mean, everything, I always use 2007 because anytime I've been asked this question, and Jack Canfield recently documented this story as well. 2007 was definitely that lightning. If lightning struck, it was 2007. That was a real defining moment. So much so that, the staff were being let go about a year later, and everything changed. The marriage was unfolding at that point. It was just a huge change. And then, but as I stepped into that, that unfolding, it's like writing a book. It's the next chapter. As you start to write, and it's funny because writing's a great analogy to everything we're talking about. Writing this novel, I've never written a novel. This is a really good novel. I'm not just saying, like, it's an extraordinary novel, and it's almost talking about what we're talking about right now. It's, as you start to write, you're not editing. And this is the problem with entrepreneurs. They'll edit themselves. They'll edit. They'll rationalize. Okay. That's the rational side of your mind trying to jump in and throw a wrench in everything. You have to just stay in that intuitive, creative, right side brain, that sensing, that feeling side. And it's just, so when you write let's say you're writing a novel, especially a transformation novel, there's this writing, and then there's a time to edit. There's a time to edit. So when you get that idea, but if you know why, and I haven't used that word galvanizing, so I'll use that since you've used that, but it's a foundation. Yeah. And as an architect, you can't build a second floor, first floor, second floor, third floor attic until that foundation's in. And we try to jump beyond. We always want to jump to how and lean our ladders up these walls without that foundation. And there's only one foundation that matters. I don't care what you're doing. If you don't know why you're here, you're not going to open up the true way. It's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen. You're just going to keep leaning your ladder against what I call disenchanted walls.
I'm curious to ask you what editing is like for you, because I'm almost tempted to feel like you must feel like it's slowing you down a little bit. But what's it like?
What's that? Sorry, I missed that.
Editing. What editing is like for you?
Editing is torture. Editing is torture. It is. It's, books aren't written. And I remember Jack telling me this. They're rewritten. And I didn't understand what that meant. Doing a self-help book is one thing. Autobiographies, complex, because you're interviewing people like you're doing with me and then writing their story. A novel is, there's this theme, but then you have to let that go. And this has been the hardest thing in my life. It's been literally almost 20 re-edits. I've never edited a book to this degree in my life. Like, it's completely rewritten 3, 4, 5 times. Like, it's mind blowing. So it's painful. I'm not going to say it's not, it's been very painful, but today was the day where my final manuscript, the final manuscript's done. This is the pre-press file that just got sent to me today, which is ironic that we're talking. I did a podcast a few days ago, but I didn't have the final pre-press. So the last 5 months has been a blur for me because I've published 3 major books all at the same time. I've never done that before. I would always do one project a year, which is fast. I've done 3. I decided for some insane reason, I did 3. I did Influence, the autobiography with 11 women, not 7, 11. Imagine interviewing 11 women. I'm talking detailed interviews, right? And then writing their story. Not easy. A novel. And then, of course, one of our Defyeneurs publications. So that quantum time, that quantum creation works. It works. I'm a great example of it. It works.
So that brings me back to the defining word of Gerry Visca's, the why. If you were going over, say, one project basically a year, why 3 and why those 3 at this time?
You know what? If you believe in the divine, I wasn't going to write this. This novel was on my horizon, but not this year. My dad passed away in October. And 2 months later, I kept waking up for 3 straight weeks at 3:11 a.m. I had no idea. I never wake up at 3:11 a.m. I wake up at 5, but not 3:11. And every time I kept waking up at 3:11, it's funny, you look into that number and it's an interesting number. I would always see my dad in my dreams. I would wake up and he was a younger guy and he's holding on to this book. And all I kept seeing was this red book, but I didn't know what it's called. It was just, I call Remembering Why. And I just kept hearing this whisper, write this book, write this book, write this book, write this novel. Because a lot of my work, my whole goal is to inspire 1 million whys. And I've decided, I had already started the autobiography for influence. So that was already on the go. Defyeneurs publication was on the go, the leadership issue. The reason I took on the novel was it was listening to a higher vibration, a higher source, and helping people get to that why, Kevin. This novel's going to do it. Like the work I've already been doing, people's already getting them there, but I needed to create some kind of emotional story. That's why it's a wondrous journey. It's called a wondrous journey to why we exist. And there's something that I tapped into that we all have, and we've all had it. We've all had it. What you're doing right now is because something happened to you. You had something years ago that's now coming to life. And if you just let go of it all and really start to remember why, everything's going to change from you. You're going to accelerate like lightning speed. So I just had to do it. And I wanted to push myself. I was already getting up at 5, but I was doing other things and, other kinds of creation. I really wanted to test myself with this novel, with this work. And, it's worked out.
How did the speaking end of things manifest itself?
2007, 2008, I started touring that book, What Have You Got to Win? And that started to really take off. And then I developed what was called a branding boot camp tour, because I was known as a branding guy. I didn't call myself the why guy until, years later, right? Around 2011. But I was known as this branding guru. And this branding boot camp went all across Canada. It was reaching close to 100,000 people. And then that started attracting speaking bureaus. And then I got registered with National Speakers Bureau, one of the top speaking bureaus. I was really honored for that to have happened. So it took off by just leaping in. I just leaped in. I didn't have a speaking bureau booking me, so I said, the hell with that. I'm going to book my own stuff. And this boot camp tour just took off.
I never asked you about how architecture went to branding, because branding and marketing, again, if you were on the outside, you could look at something like architecture and almost take kind of a cold, kind of a tactile view of it. That doesn't take into account everything that you described earlier in our conversation, Gerry, but I would maybe think with my layman's view of something like that as, building buildings and coming up with the plans, as opposed to, communication and storytelling and all of those things related to marketing. And trust me, I've worked a lot of my years in marketing. There are a lot of people that have that word attached to their business card that don't know what it's about, bless their hearts. Oh. But how did that come to be where, branding and marketing and those things really spiked your curiosity? I
like to think I'm a little bit more unique. I'm not going to say every guy that studied architecture, went on to do what I'm doing. I don't know of anybody else. I mean, there's a few architects that went on to create some cool hybrid. There's a lot of architects that are designing watches and furniture, you name it. Kevin, I was always on the presentation side of architecture. I was always on that creative, conceptual, presenting, and I think unless you kind of live that kind of industry, that field, again, you can be really enjoyed. I was always on the concept creation side, and I loved it. I loved, getting better and better at, like, the models I would build. I still have a few, like, they would blow your mind. Like, they're just these beautiful models. So I was always a visual presenter. I was a very good presenter. I was an amazing illustrator. Ever since I was 6, I was drawing, painting. I studied art lessons and art history. So I was always creative. I was always on that presentation side. The branding, which then became the basis for the why work, the way I was attacking the branding was the way I attacked architecture. I was always looking for the essence of stuff. What's the essence of this project? What does this project want to be? Right. And I love that because I often say we're human beings, not human doings. And once you understand that why is a being, it's a way of being. I was always trying to get to the heart and the essence of projects, of cultures. If I was designing an urban design project, what's the essence of it? That's branding. Branding's the essence. What's the essence? What does it feel like? What do we want the end user to feel and experience with our brand? So they're actually quite related if you're trained that way. And I was trained and mentored that way. So
what part of what you're doing these days do you enjoy the most?
I'd say, all my work is classified under inspiration. So to inspire others is what turns me on. To creatively inspire someone to really take action. That was my deeper why, which is to, I exist to creatively inspire people and their ideas to action. So an example, this Saturday, giving back. I'm doing this free workshop for 3 hours. It's for serious writers. The kind of knowledge base that I'm giving them, Kevin, like to get something like that. I mean, you're getting a 16-time author who's going to give you all this stuff for free. So doing that is probably one of my favorite things, giving back, helping people, publishing people. But what I love about that is something from the 50 people there on Saturday, I guarantee you 7 are going to take, they're going to take that knowledge and that inspiration. They're going to take off and they're going to do something with their life. They're going to write that book and they're going to look back and say, it was because that guy showed up on Saturday and he believed in me. So that excites me.
What examples can you give me, Gerry, of people maybe like that you've come across in your travels, wherever they may have been around the world, that you have been able to interact with, and then you hear back from them at some later date that they can report back, this is what has now happened as a result of. What are the first couple of maybe things that come to mind along those lines?
Well, there's quite a few. I mean, there was a lot of, I'm not going to name names, but there were authors that, I've coached a lot of authors and mentored a lot of authors, through some really, I don't really deliver too many of those programs now, but it's great seeing that person that was just an everyday person. And all of a sudden they're on stage speaking. I see them frontline keynote speaker. They've generated over 500,000 in book sales. And I was at the start of that. So, and some of the people that are published alongside of me in Jack Canfield's book, Living the Success Principles, some of those people were in my circle as well. So, the people that I coached and really, really ignited, and seen them go on to, some of them went on to do some Oprah interviews, on her website, the Oprah Live, whatever. So, stuff like that's pretty cool. Seeing that happen is kind of neat.
How much have you been able to, I'm envisioning you as that little 6-year-old kid on the magic carpet.
Yeah.
Because you're you strike me, Gerry, as such a massive action taker.
Yeah.
Things are happening quick. You've had 3 of these major projects even within the last year. You're meeting people at a furious pace. You're on different stages. You're igniting whys. You're creating. You're making quantum level creations. How much of that are you able to soak in from sitting up there on that carpet and see as it's going by versus how much just it's there and it's gone?
All of it. Everything for me is in the moment. None of that is ever, I'll give you an example. My daughter was diagnosed with stage 3 cancer on July 5th on her birthday last year. And I was with her in the hospital for months, like literally 3, 4, 5 months. So, you get these glimpses that life is very short. Life is very brilliant, very brief. So I don't let a day go by where I'm not soaking it all in. It goes by fast, but I'm also designing a life that I intended to design years ago and living that life that I intentionally designed and architected. So I soak it all in. And, you just interviewed my life partner, Angela, and together we really soak that in, right? We don't let a day go by where we're not, like, even tonight, every night before I drift off to sleep, I do a gratitude journal. You'll be in my gratitude journal tonight. So, even just capturing that every night before you go to bed, the 5 things that you're grateful for, that keeps me grounded.
I'm wondering about how my mind was just drifting, Gerry, back to you in school, and whether whether somebody that just is on the move and is that relentless in their passion and pursuing their why, even as a child, is sometimes the one they want to slap medication onto, isn't it?
Totally, for sure. Like I said, I was always in trouble. They used to throw chalk at me for daydreaming. And I remember telling my kids when they were daydreaming, just keep closing your eyes and have fun. So we just don't understand it. I mean, teachers, I feel for them, but look where they've come from. And not all of them are like that. I mean, there's some that, but imagine taking a course. Imagine a course. And it's funny because Angela and I had launched a wide boot camp. It was called Big Think Youth, that was reaching 33,000 youth across Canada in grades 7, 8, and 9. But imagine a course that's called Your Passion and Purpose. Let's ignite your why. Imagine heaven forbid we would actually launch something like that, because it's not driven by a corporation that's maybe financing it or creating jobs out of it. So, it's just all about igniting that. And I got in a lot of trouble for pursuing my passions and my purposes, but I'm living the life that I dreamed about. So.
You mentioned earlier, Gerry, about how some schools have brought you in and then maybe scratched their head as to why. Yeah, why do we bring this guy? I'm wondering when, if at all, you've ever met with some resistance at some point along the way that you had to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. The MBA programs love me. Like like Queen's University, bringing me in, like it's all about just going for it. They love that. There were certain high schools that would challenge me, later on, not in front of the audience, because, they wouldn't do that, but they would question like, oh, you can't live your passion. And I mean, picture this person's telling me that they're about 400 pounds overweight, balding, divorced 4 times, and, they're not happy with their life, and they're telling me you can't live their passion. And I look at them and I don't argue. I have empathy for them. And I just simply say to them, the only thing that matters is the outcomes in your life, and the outcomes are only going to be the result of living passion and purpose. That's the equation I've created that's guided me. It's passion plus purpose equals outcome, and the outcome is the deeper why. And once you start to tap into what do you want to experience, you're going to look back and say, "Man, I'm not living my passion." So yeah, I got resistance from these ignorant high school teachers that would think that you can't tell a kid to go live his passion. Yeah, tell the late Steve Jobs that you can't live your passion, right? That's a great example. Just look up Steve Jobs on YouTube. He'll be telling you, if you're not passionate about you're not going to get through what it is you really want to do. And how can you expect others to be passionate?
How do you help people begin to discover what their passion might be?
Well, that's a great question. So when I do why time with people, so I do a lot of why time, and it's a 30-minute one-on-one. When people buy 2 copies of my books, they get why time. And that's huge because that's not an easy thing to schedule. There's thousands of these sessions happening, and that's a free gift. I start off with that equation. I start off with, what is it that you're seeking? So just write that down, be what you seek. So I was seeking inspiration at a time in 2007 when I was ready for it. I wasn't inspiring, but I wanted to become that. So I decided to be. So when you decide to be what you're seeking, it's a shift. And whatever it is you're deciding, for me, I decided to become inspiring. So all of a sudden I started touring. So I start off with what brings you joy? What gets you leaping out of bed? Obviously this gets you leaping out of bed. So that's the first thing we tap into with passion is, what's your joy? And it's funny because it's the things that you don't think, it's the things you think you're not going to be able to make a living out of that you need to tap into. I never thought that existing as an inspirational individual would lead to publishing work and all these incredible things I've manifested. So what's your joy? That's the way to get to it. What
is the difference in your mind between passion and why?
Well, they're interconnected. Why is that outcome? Why is that the combination of that passion and purpose? Those two together create the why. So the why is the result of the passion, joy, and purpose. How can I be of service to others? When you finally tap into those two and you ignite it, you'll start to ignite that deeper why. Now, I define the why as WHY, the world helped by you. And the world's only going to be helped by you when you're living your passion and purpose. Imagine a world where everybody knew what their true universal role was, what their role in the universe was, what their passion was, what their service to others was meant to be, what those unique abilities were. It would be a different world. There'd be no war. There'd be no competition. That's the evolution of the human race. And that's, people like myself, there's a lot of us, some people call us light workers. It's people that are like Sherpas, right? We're guiding others to uncovering that.
I never asked how you and Angela came across each other's paths. I didn't ask her either. How'd that happen?
We were both coaching at a place in Burlington called Think Spot. It's not there anymore. But I was coaching extensively there. That's where a lot of my practice was. And the owner had met Angela a couple times, so she started coaching there. But we never saw each other. And we have very similar energies. And she kept saying, "Oh, you got to meet Gerry. You got to meet Gerry. This guy's incredible. He's the why guy, and his energy." She was like a female version of me. And everybody kept saying, "Oh, you got to meet Angela. You got to meet Angela." So it was months later when we finally met each other. And it's funny. I had the dates wrong, which I never get wrong. And then we ended up meeting. And it was like when I saw Angela, and I write about this in my novel because it's really dedicated to her. I felt that I had loved her 1,000 years ago. And I call it timeless love. I literally fell to my knees when I saw her. It was like there was something going on. We had done something together before, and it was just this polarizing effect. It's just remarkable if you ever experience it. It's incredible.
How long ago was that, Gerry?
It was in 2010, end of 2010, 2011. So
the reason why I asked you that is that I'm wondering how interesting it is. 2007 was that was the lightning strike, right? And there was the major shift. And I'm not trying to go linear on you here, but 1999 was in 98, 99 was another key time, and then with what you just described. So to be so deep in tune, with your why and with your passion and with your purpose, and to really feel at home there, and to be taking such massive, consistent quantum levels of action on that, but then still be experiencing these lightning strikes from the universe, to know that there are more of them out there. What's that feel like?
It's remarkable. It's literally, you mentioned the word divine. It's universal. It's electric. It's you don't feel alone. You feel connected to everything. You feel we're not meant to be alone. Kevin, we're not meant to be isolated. We're meant to be connected. And you feel connected to this universal energy, this source. And it feels remarkable. There's hard days, of course. There's tough days, there's impatient days. But what overrides that is this knowing that this little time that we have, which is so minuscule, that your life mattered. Like before you know it, this could be our last interview. I could choke on a mint tomorrow, and that's it. You get the last word, right? That could be pretty cool for you.
I'll take a pass on that, but
yeah.
Thanks for the opportunity just the same.
But that's how Angela and I live. You're going to see an explosive movement we're creating around simple living and minimalism, and in order to create and live your why. You're going to see a documentary coming out on it, and it's taken time to get there. It's taken many reinventions. It's not easy. Kevin, Angela probably said this. I don't know if she may have said this, but everybody wants success in 5 easy steps. They want it like that. They want it in a workshop. They want to join a network marketing company and hit the top in 3 months, and that's it. They're not willing to pay the dues. They're not willing to go deep. They're not willing to let go of limiting beliefs. They're not willing to shut off 6 hours of TV and just read. I've read literally 100 books this year alone, because to write, it's funny. I interview writers all the time and they don't read. And I'm like, you want to be a writer, but you don't read. It's not going to happen. Well, I don't have time. Because you're wasting your time. You're the one that you have the same time that I have. So you've chosen to lay stuff in your schedule that doesn't get you anywhere you need to go. So
you used a word earlier, empathy, and I'm wondering what it's like when you know about those deeper levels of connection, the divine word that you mentioned, and then what it's like when you see just how prevalent that tidal wave of the other is, and those, and frankly, Gerry, I would have considered myself among that group up until the last many years of finally kind of waking up to it and getting more connected. But how it feels, and I'm curious of whether I'm guessing how you're going to answer this question correctly or not, but watching that go on and knowing that there's something out there for all of the people that are sort of in that column, and I don't like the way that I'm describing that, but I'm sensing that you know exactly what I'm getting at. To see all of that, the rhythm of life and the sheeple, if you will, just going on.
What? It's not a hierarchy. It's a great question. You've had very, very, very thought-provoking questions. I'm actually quite honored by your questions. Angela's. I'm going to give Angela the credit here, because she's taught me empathy and compassion at whole new levels. I never had it. I'll be honest with you. For years, I was charging ahead with what I know needed to get done, what I knew I needed to be for others. And if you didn't get it, you didn't get it. I would move on to the next person and help them. She's taught me new levels of compassion and understanding. At the end of the day, there's only two emotions that really matter. And you either live with love or you live with fear. I like summing things up to just simplistic terms. And most of the world is we're on a very interesting teeter-totter right now. We're either on the brink of extinction. The world is more obese than it's ever been. Bankrupt. Most countries are bankrupt. We're on the verge of ice age meltdowns. You name it. Like, it's the worst time. At the same time, the world's also waking up. So it's interesting, because the more that we just embrace people and help them love, you'll crush the fear, because the two can't coexist. And fear typically is just driven from ignorance. Most people are unaware that they're even unaware, because they're just on this treadmill running. And they keep thinking that the outcome is money. And that's the problem. Everyone thinks outcome, that passion, purpose, outcome. They keep thinking outcome is money. And it's not. It's not money. The money will flow when you're living your passion and purpose. So it's just having new levels of empathy. I have it now more than ever for people that aren't aware and aren't unconscious. That's why I publish all the work you see at Defyeneurs and all the work we do. It's to give back. And all of a sudden, 1 million people are ignited, who go on to ignite another 10 million. And that's the ripple of influence. That's what happens.
What, now that you're near the conclusion of the novel.
Yeah, the novel, Remembering Why.
Yeah.
It's extraordinary.
Not that I'm trying to, and I love that you're describing it that way, because here's another thing that I used to do, not to haul it and make it about me, but I thought I was doing the right thing by being self-deprecating. Someone would try to pay me a compliment about something, and well, thank you, but it could have been this or could have been. And you don't even know that. You think you're doing the right thing, and you're dumping on the other person who's trying to give a part of themselves to you, and to put your heart and your soul into something, and to know that it's extraordinary. It can't be anything but, because it's such an expression of everything that you've lived and represent to this point. It's awesome to hear you talking like that.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I'm not saying that with ego. I think what's extraordinary is this wondrous journey, the ability to take this work of why and go from a linear to a nonlinear. See, it's easy to write a self-help book when you've done it many times. It's basically A to Z, right? Here's the insights, and let's help you work through them. But to write a story in a way that challenges time, that defies all reality, that defies illusion, and then wrapping it up into this wondrous journey, it's extraordinary in that it's just cool to see it unfold. And there's margin notes in it. It's very creative. It's not just one font, and that's like a font, and that's it. It's this main character who's, ironically enough, you got to know this is inspired by true events. Okay, he's an architect who's living a passionless life. He's successful, but he's going through a lot of grief, and it's only until he reconnects with this really old mentor, this wise mentor, Laszlo, who brings him on this journey to Mount Kilimanjaro, and he helps him remember why. He helps him remember what his true passion is. Only until that happens does he go and change the world, and he changes it. So this book is challenging a lot of our beliefs, our conditioned beliefs, in a way that you're going to be like, oh my God, I didn't. Oh my God, there's characters that you didn't know that. Oh, I didn't know that this was this. So it's just interesting to see it like that. And now we're trying to get it made into a movie. We're meeting with film directors right now, and it's exciting. That's my goal, is to get this made into a movie.
You just started to answer, I think, part of what I was going to ask you next year, because it's so fun to see you so charged up about it. I'm wondering what the process of bringing that story to life and all of those extra edits and all of the blood, sweat, and tears that went into it, that whole process, that's done to throw your thoughts of what's up ahead of you into a slightly different context.
Big time. It's changed everything. It's made me evolve into this transformational novelist. And I don't like titles, but Angela actually started calling me that. It's making me want to now. It's taking the writing to whole new creative levels. It's going into people's hearts and working with them and helping them realize their deeper why through a story, through a very compelling fable. It's an inspiring fable, So I think I'll continue to do. There's a sequel I want to write about what happens because there's this really epic ending to this novel that you're just gonna want to see part 2. So I'm excited about that level. I'm excited about helping 1 million people really understand why they're here through this work. And I think remembering why is just the start of the next evolution of documentaries, film. I have a real passion for film, and especially inspired film, like inspired fables. So that's where I'm heading to now.
It sounds like another lightning bolt, Gerry.
A lightning bolt is just hit. It hit this year. It hit big time, and it's ready. We're ready.
That's awesome. Good for you. Congratulations. I can't wait to read it. And just before we wrap up, just to share with you personally, I'm not all that far removed from having, gone through that process of evaluating things and looking at things like, the old saw about you are the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with, and how do you feel about that? And took a look around at my life and thought, with love and respect, I don't feel very good and need to be starting to do something about it. And to now find myself in the company of people like you, and that you would honor me and anybody that invests in themselves enough to take the time to listen in and share in the time that you've shared with me and with us here today.
Thank you.
Really is an incredible gift, and is it a validation for me of everything that you've just shared, that, gosh, if you can just get off the sidelines, stop thinking about the how so much, and just get into the game, and you're going to open up whole new worlds for yourself. So I'm not saying that I'm up on the magic carpet yet, but I feel like I've at least been invited sort of into the queue line, and people like you to be so welcoming to those that when you see those lights go on, it's an incredible gift, and I thank you for that, and on behalf of everyone listening as well.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I appreciate this time. It was an honor. I enjoyed it.
You can connect with Gerry Visca online on his website, gerryvisca.com. I'll spell that for you, Gerryvisca, Gerryvisca, gerryvisca.com is his website. On social media, you can connect with him on Facebook at facebook.com/gerry.visca. Gerry Visca is his handle on Twitter and also on Instagram. And he's got a YouTube channel as well. If you go onto YouTube and search his name, you'll find his channel, subscribe to that, and you'll be enjoying some great content. Of course, all of those links are listed on the show notes blog post with this particular episode, which is number 51. You can find that at noschedulemanpodcast.com. If you like this episode, I'm pretty sure that you're going to like episode 49, Step into Life and a New Level of Mind, with Angela Konkin. Angela was referred to several times by Gerry in the discussion that we just concluded. Angela and Gerry enjoy a great life partnership and are both wonderful people, and I encourage you to go back and listen to that. Episode 49, Step into Life and a New Level of Mind. I mentioned in the introduction that I met Angela and Gerry at the book release of our mutual friend Michael Doyle. He joined me on this episode, or on this podcast, in episode 44, which is called Living Fully. I think you'll enjoy that one as well, Michael Doyle's journey, episode 44, Living Fully. And since we were talking about how why is not linear and discovering yourself not linear, and how the lights go on at certain times, and how books can be such a great inspiration, remembering why from Gerry and Influence and all the other of the 16 books he's got. I did a podcast episode last year called 5 Books That Changed My Life and the Stories Behind Them. It's episode 27. And I'd be really interested if any of those same books are on your shelf, and what are the ones that have really inspired you. I am hoping that one or more written by Gerry Visca will be on both my shelf and yours the next time we have a discussion like this. You can find all those episodes and all archived episodes of the No Schedule Man podcast on iTunes or at noschedulemanpodcast.com. Please take a moment to subscribe, share, leave a comment, a rating, or a review. I'd love to hear from you and to know what you think, and thank you for that. And in the meantime, you can reach me at kevinbolmer.com. NoScheduleMan.com takes you to the same place. All my social media channel links are up there, as is the sign up for my email list. I'd love for you to keep in touch. I do hope that you'll join me on this journey and add your voice to mine. I want to thank you again for taking the time to listen and to share part of your day and your journey with me. I'm really grateful. And I hope to have you back with me next week as we explore another journey on the No Schedule Man podcast.
Just a little deja vu.